All righty, Tom here. So I'm not sure where you were during COVID, this whole pandemic, and the last couple years where people keep on screaming at you, trust the science, or for those of us who are skeptical of science, you're a science denier. And I think if you can see here, this article by Dr. Jason Yuan says consciousness isn't made in the brain, is being channeled. A theoretical physicist calls for scientific spirituality. And I think the reality is, for those of us who are just commonsensical and we're realizing that, and a lot of us who are scientists and Christians are able to actually integrate this very easily because we have a certain humility to know that there's a limit to science, because if God created the world and God created the science, that can explain a lot of the world, but not all of the world. And that there's a certain level beyond science that are just unexplainable. So a theoretical physicist is somebody who takes all the math, the physics, and a lot of this stuff, and they use, and they crunch the numbers and try to come up with theories as to how the physics and the physical world works. That guy, Stephen Hawking, he's a theoretical physicist. So this guy, this physicist, James Glatfelder, is quoted here, and he's basically talking about, where is it? The issue of that right here. Current physics and biology cannot explain qualia, or as we've always brought up as Christians, how subjective experiences can originate from brain neurons firing. I mean, if you think about an apple, you don't think your brain neurons or your brain itself actually creates an apple in there, right? It's this conscious, this transition between your neurons firing to you visualizing and actually seeing an apple, and that is unexplainable. So Glatfelder is basically saying, if you're down here, transitioning into this new post-materialist world, post-materialist. Now, science is all about the material physical, whereas a lot of us who are of the faith think we can completely reconcile having a material and also an immaterial world, which is this kind of like world that is unseen. And Glatfelder argues for one principle that unites us all. Consciousness itself underlies the nature of reality and exists in a universal field throughout the cosmos. And he states that the brain does not generate consciousness. The brain does not generate consciousness. Rather, the brain picks up consciousness from this universal field like a radio signal and transmits it. So in a way, he's theorizing, but I believe that he's kind of, in a way, backtracking to how science was in the beginning and how a lot of the world was in the beginning, where we see a lot of the spiritual and sacred in the whole physical world. And before enlightenment, we were able to actually reconcile and integrate both a physical world and also a spiritual world. Because if you think about it, how do artists create? How do even just normal people, we can sit there and we can think of things and we can visualize, and it's our consciousness. And how do we get inspiration sometimes from the ether? And we believe that that's where, as he was saying, the brain picks up consciousness from this universal field like a radio and transmits it. And I believe that God created this whole universe, and he's outside of it, but he's also in it. And the consciousness that we have, and we all have, radiates and emanates from the source, which is from God. So God's consciousness is throughout the whole world and is right all around us. And then for us as human beings created by him, we have this consciousness, a soul, and whether it's spiritually dead or alive, we have this soul that can actually sense the cosmos and actually sense God, and that's how God can nudge us spiritually, and we can have this sixth sense, this gut feeling at a spiritual level or this consciousness level. And it's interesting that science is starting to theorize that, hey, maybe the physical world is not all there is. And I mean, if they just talk to Bible-believing Christians, I mean, or even people who are of different religious perspectives who actually believe in an immaterial world, or those people who actually, dabble in psychedelics. I don't think they should do that. But we all understand that there is a whole world out there that is beyond the physical. And I think science is in a way kind of catching up to us, or kind of regressing back to that. And where is it? Here we go. So, in terms of this consciousness, through these deeper states of consciousness, whether reached through meditation, shamanic trance, or psychedelics, as I said, Christianity, I believe, is a true religion, but doesn't mean that there's also counterfeit experiences at the spiritual realm. They do exist. It says here, people of all faiths and ethnicities have universally claimed one major theme. Everything in the universe is connected by an omniscient intelligence that the mind can access beyond space and time. And for me as a Christian, and coming from a Christian perspective, we believe that this omniscient intelligence is God, the God of the Bible. And I think the sooner we as a society can really accept that science is not the end all and be all of how we explain the world, the sooner we can actually become more aware of who actually is the source of all of life that's around us. And if we can actually acknowledge that, then that baseline or that foundation can help us order the world. And for you, if you don't have a spiritual foundation, or you think, and if you're an atheist who thinks that reason is all there is, the question is, how do you know that you're actually thinking? You think you're thinking, but if you don't accept the immature world as consciousness, or you don't have an explanation for this consciousness, then you're lying to yourself, because your consciousness is telling you that this thinking that you're thinking actually makes sense, when based upon your own logic, your thinking is just all random, determined behavior that's instinctive versus actually of your own volition and from your own source of consciousness, and can be inspired and influenced by this omniscient intelligence, which I call God. So it's interesting to see that science is actually starting to come around towards a realization that God exists, which if they talk to Christians, we could tell them what's what. But anyway, so I thought this was interesting. So Dr. Jason Yuan, Biofuel Science on Substack. Look him up. Look up this interview. I think it's worth it. All right. Take care.